Welcome everyone to Mythstorie, a podcast about myths and history. I am one of your hosts, Bryant, with my permanent guest, Cammy. Cammy, save me! I'm tripping up already.
Oh, I,
Cammy,
I will absolutely save you right now. How are you,
thank
Bryant?
you. I'm good. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic.
That's awesome. So, Cammy, it's been a little while since we had that awesome experience at the VCon.
Yeah.
We had 300 go up last week. That went really well, and the podcast has been growing way more than not that we expected. It's been great. Things have been really nice. So if you're just joining us, Mythstorie is a podcast where every week we like to tell you a story from a famous myth or legend, or it can be a little more historically fact-based. But once we've told you that story, we like to dive into some of the history behind it. Now, Cammy and I aren't really like experts. We both really like this stuff a lot. And we like to bring in our friendly banter in with it too, which is why we had a fun time doing 300 last week and a bunch of others. So, Cammy, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about Sun Wukong, the Monkey King.
Good job. You said it right.
Yay!
Yeah, so this is a really well-known story thing. I mean, it's kind of crazy because it's massively popular. It's an ancient, or not ancient. It's a medieval Chinese novel that was written in the 16th century, and it's super popular though. It ever since it started, it is and has been super popular, and there's tons of modern adaptations and spin-offs in the Western, Eastern, in all hemispheres. It's wildly popular, and we'll talk about why some of that too. But there's 100 chapters of the book. Cammy, we're starting with chapter 1, right? We're just gonna
Sort of. I took
8 hour this, right?
Right.
This is the longest episode. Just
I,
verbatim.
it's going to work a lot like how we do the 1001
Cool.
night story.
Yeah.
Because it is so long.
Oh, yeah,
We're not
yeah.
going to break this up into two parts, but
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you a little bit from the first
Awesome.
chapter, and then most of it will be from, I believe it's the second chapter.
Cool. All right, yeah. Well, please regale us with Journey to the West, as it's known to us.
Sure. So I used innerjourneytothewest.com for their translation.
Thanks, guys.
The Monkey King was born unlike all other mortal creatures. He came forth fully formed from a stone egg, which contained within it all the power of earth and heaven. He was deemed king of the monkeys and served his tribe well for many years. But the Sun Wukong, our Monkey King, was not satisfied with life, knowing it would one day end. He set out to find the way. It was not long before he found a teacher that was willing to show him what he seeked in exchange for living in his community of monks and tending to normal chores with his fellow students. He cared for the garden, swept the floors, burned incense until 7 years had passed. At this point, his teacher was ready to show him the way. The monkey was so excited to hear the teacher speak his truths that he smiled greatly and clapped his hands and feet in joy. The teacher was displeased by the show and accused him of not listening to the very first lesson. The magical primate tried to explain himself, but the teacher would not hear it. He asked our hero why he was here, if he did not want to know the way. Sun Wukong explained that he did indeed want to know the way, and would learn any path the teacher thought was best in learning immortality. So the teacher went on to explain several paths to him, but he was uninterested in any path that would not lead him to immortality. So the teacher, ever frustrated by the insolent monkey, took his cane and hit him 3 times on the head. Then he walked with his hands behind him and shut the door to his house. The other students berated the tiny student for making the master in the lesson early, but Sun Wukong was not fazed, for he knew the master's secret communication. He had given him instructions without words to come to the back of his house at the 3rd watch. That night, the Monkey King did just that, and woke his teacher from a slumber. The teacher was astonished that this monkey had known that 3 hits on his head meant he should come at the 3rd watch, and putting his hands behind his back meant to come through the back door. He was ready to teach this monkey the path he so desired. The teacher taught him the way of immortality right there in his humble home. And for 3 years, Sun Wukong practiced until he was a master of the spells he had learned that night. One day, the teacher told him of coming three disasters. You see, anyone who wants immortality must suffer greatly for it. 500 years after receiving the elixir that makes your appearance always youthful and your body unable to die, you will be struck by a thunderbolt from the heavens. If you can hide from this, 500 years will pass, and then you will be burned by immortal fire. Still, if you survive, you will be blown to pieces by the mighty wind of heaven. But I can teach you the secrets to survive and hide from these fates. Sun Wukong was frightened, so he implored his master to teach him every spell he needed to hide from these outcomes. The teacher whispered all of the spells in his ear and left Sun Wukong and his fellow students. The students wanted to see the tricks he had just learned. So he turned himself into a mighty pine, and everyone cheered. The teacher was disturbed by the noise, so he went to see what was causing it. He saw Sun Wukong turning back from a pine and became angry at the hubris of the small creature. He banished Wukong to the place where he came from and forbade him to ever speak of the teacher. The Monkey King was happy to return to his home and see his children again. He flew home on the winds, and when he arrived, the welcome was warm but urgent. A demon had kidnapped his children and taken them to a nearby cave. Someone must immediately rescue them. He set off on the wind and came to the cave, where he asked the minor demons guarding it to retrieve their master. They did as they were told, and a fierce demon emerged. He laughed at the tiny monkey, who had no weapons, and told him he would fight him, but he must put down his own sword first to make it a fair fight. The monkey thanked him for agreeing to fight hand to hand. It was only seconds before the brawl began in earnest. Sun Wukong kicked and punched the demon so quickly he could not do anything against it. So when there was an opening in combat, the demon grabbed the sword and swung it at our hero. Wukong easily dodged the weapon and pulled out a single hair, to which he whispered, "Become." And the hair split into hundreds of hairs, which transformed into versions of Sun Wukong, each hair knowing everything the king had ever learned. They made quick work of the demon and destroyed the lair where he hid. He then took the monkey children home on the clouds and gave them all the surname Wukong, so they could one day take their place among the immortals.
Nice. So that's Sun Wukong, one of the many stories. Yeah, I checked my notes while you're reading. Yeah, the first 100 chapters, the first 7 are basically just about him. They're like self-contained stories that basically set him up, because he's definitely like, I mean, he's like all the X-Men rolled into one or something. I don't know. He's crazy. He's got tons of different powers. So I'll ask this, Kimmy. What did you think of, like, when you started looking into this? What did you think about the stories?
Well, I was overwhelmed, to be honest, because there's so many.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to kind of hone in on one that was more of a concise story that didn't, span through chapters and chapters.
No, that's really good. Yeah. Well, and so I don't even know too much. I know of Journey to the West, and I definitely know of Sun Wukong just because of his everything that he spawned. Most notably, the character of Goku from Dragon Ball Z is
okay.
Or Dragon Ball, I should say.
Sense.
Right? Yeah, and because Goku's name is actually Son Goku, like Sun Wukong, and in the Japanese version of Dragon Ball, they call him Sun. That's his name. Or that's his name is Son Goku, but they call him Son. That's the name that they call him by typically. And he's got a tail. He, especially in Dragon Ball, in the early episodes of Dragon Ball Z, he has a tail. He flies around on a cloud. He's got these powers. So like Akira Toriyama, when he was totally influenced by Sun Wukong, and in some ways, the whole story of Journey to the West. But that's probably one of the bigger ones. But the story, like, it's huge. I mean, it's absolutely huge. Well, but first I'll kind of talk about the history of it. So, like I said before, this was written in the 16th century. so the early 1500s, and it was written by a well-educated Chinese man named Wu Cheng-en, who was a prolific poet and writer in general. He was like well-versed in Confucian study and things like that, and it looks like there's some pretty good records as far as his education and everything. What's kind of funny, though, is if he did write it, because we don't know with absolute certainty. This is kind of like when we talked about Guan Yu, another kind of famous Chinese person gone into crazy myth, or legendary myth. The Romance of the Three Kingdoms book that's based off of, which I think was the 14th century. The author is also kind of not 100% well known. So it was published posthumously because he had passed by the time it was published. Now that's pretty believable. It would take a long time. And what's pretty interesting too is the way that the book was written was in the modern vernacular, not in an ancient classical style, I should say, not really ancient, but most writing done then was very, like, again, if you think about the Guan Yu episode, we talked about the importance of the Han dynasty that was about 200 BC to 280 roughly. So, and it's one of the most important dynasties in China. It's probably the most important dynasty for kind of Chinese culture. And so that they were kind of writing in this period or in this way that would have been like, anyway, revered to that cultural period. So he wrote in the modern vernacular. It also had a lot of silly stories. I
have a question. When you say modern vernacular, you mean modern, not common, right?
I mean 15th century modern, like we're just dudes writing stories. Okay. Yeah. It wasn't there was the best way I could probably, my uneducated butt could explain it is if like we were writing a story and we wrote it as if we were like Shakespeare, that's like how you were supposed to write. So like if he was following the rules,
like how Shakespeare would change his vernacular depending on whether it was noble or a commoner speaking. Yeah, that's so like, not that. Okay.
That was speech then, but like to us, it's like this like fancy pants kind of writing. So that's kind of how that's the way I would kind of describe it. So it's fancy pants to us now, but it was normal then though. It was in the 15th century.
It wasn't fancy pants, and it should have been.
Right, exactly.
Okay, gotcha.
So but it was very accessible, I guess, for that, and it had lots of goofy stories too. Like it wasn't. There was lots of these exploits of Sun Wukong. Lots of crazy stuff happened. I mean, it was like a comic book, like the plot sometimes, from what I've seen. So. And Wu Cheng-en, like I said, he didn't publish it it wasn't published until after he was gone. And he actually remained poor. He worked for some time to become a part of the government, but he just hated it. He didn't like China. I mean, I was going to say China is known for their corruption. I mean, governments are known for their corruption.
In general, yes.
In general, yeah. And the way that China is such a vast land. The way it was governed was pretty smart in having, like, you had tiered levels of things, but yeah, corruption was pretty high as well, and so he wasn't into that. So he just lived more humbly and wrote and did that. So, but it totally went wild from the moment it was printed in at the end of the 15th century, at the end of the 15th century, I should say, because he died in the 1580s. Yes, yeah. He died in the 1580s, so it was published about 10 years after his death. And ever since that publication, though, it has been wildly popular and has spawned tons of wood prints, art, and all sorts of things. And even someone did a spin-off story of it, like basically like an official fan fiction of it, which talked more about Sun Wukong, funny enough. So going on from that, the stories themselves are really interesting. The literal translation is like Chronicle of Journey to the West. That's kind of what like the word for word is. So Journey to the West is what it is. And the story, while Sun Wukong is an awesome main character, it's actually he's not the main character. The main character is Tang Sanzang, who is a Buddhist monk, and it's the whole point of the story is that he is traveling west to India in order to find like original sutras, Buddhist sutras. He wants, like basically to go to the source for his religion and
Sun
learn.
Wukong was like protecting him the whole
Yeah,
time.
yeah. Sun Wukong there was 4 of them total, the 4 main characters, Sun Wukong and his Tang and the 2 companions. It was just their exploits and their craziness because they were like mythical beings that were trying to stop them and creatures, and Sun Wukong used like every superpower in the book to stop them and help them and all that stuff. So, but yeah, that's kind of the base of the book. And we believe that the story is actually based off of a very famous Chinese Buddhist monk named Xuanzang, who in he was around in the early 600s, so about 700 years before the publication of the book and before Wu Cheng'en was alive. There was this Buddhist monk who he was around during the Southern Song dynasty, which I think was like one of the dynasties that had to deal with the Mongols a bunch. Who didn't deal with the Mongols? So during this time period, the Southern Song dynasty was dealing with a war and travel was prohibited. But this Buddhist monk was worried. No, during the Tang dynasty. That's what it is. The Tang dynasty. The Southern Song dynasty is when the stories got popular, of this monk is when the story started coming around. The Tang dynasty was just around this time period too, though. Yes. Or I might have mixed those two up. Either way, around 600 AD is when he was alive. And he was worried that the versions of text, Buddhist texts that they had received weren't accurate, and so he wanted to go to the source. And so he took the foot journey of heading to India, even though travel was restricted. It was also pretty perilous. I mean, this is kind of crazy, but he was able to go. And we have an autobiography. We have a biography written by someone he knew, birth records. There's also a temple in Taiwan today that's dedicated to him. And he has this great work that Xuanzang wrote called the Great Tang Records on the Western Region. So when he came back, the emperor was like, you thought, he banned travel, but he was so like, dude, this is so awesome. Write great records on the region. And he did. Xuanzang was apparently extremely careful in writing. He wrote like a great view for the people of the Tang Dynasty to understand what he saw. And he was very descriptive in the cultures he came across, the areas he came across, and how they did things. So this dude was really on point with his like record keeping and was able to really give a great idea of this area. It's one of the best records used when you're studying this period, because it's the primary source in like the best sense. I mean, this guy was physically there writing it down. It's not like Herodotus, who was maybe writing this crap down, or maybe some Greek dude told him.
When he was 4 years old.
Right, yeah, come on. No, Xuanzang was like, I'm hoofing it to India. I'm going to write it all down too. So he did, and it's just amazing. So again, through the years, the stories of Xuanzang, the Great Tang Records on the Western Region, his piece, I'm sure circulated, and he was very legendary in a lot of ways. And again, there's a whole temple, Buddhist temple, dedicated to this guy for his work. So he was really revered, and Xuanzang wasn't the only one to kind of want to do this. This other guy Fa Xian was another Chinese Buddhist who was also worried about the Buddhist text in China, and he was someone who advocated for that too, and did certain things to help sort of bring the religion back to like its roots in a lot of ways. So
do we know how accurate the text was? Did they ever mention, or do you know if they mentioned that?
The Great Tang Records, or
the text that they were trying to find in India?
No, I didn't see that. I mean, I think he just succeeded on his journey. Okay. Faxian, Faxian, Faxian. He's the one you want to look up if you want to like know more. He was someone who really changed. Yeah, he did also travel by foot 400 years prior. During 337 to 422 is when he was alive. So he did this journey too. But again, we've talked about this a lot. You play that game of telephone, play it in ancient China. Buddhist texts, you're translating from two very, very different languages, and it's surely going to get convoluted in a lot of ways. And Buddhism there's lots of different versions of Buddhism, and there's localizations. Also, Taoism becoming more and more popular. It gets intermingled. Zen Buddhism, it's very, there's a lot of mingling there. And so again, some of these dudes were like, I want to go back to the source in a way. It reminds me of like the constant Christian ideology to go back to the Holy Lands and things like that to see the ground zero for the religion. So that's kind of the idea. But yeah, that's who Tang Sanzong is definitely based off of, in part Fashan and Xuanzang. So it's really cool because I feel like this is something that would happen today, where you take an ancient story and then you write a story about it, and then you throw in a monkey dude who can like shoot lightning bolts and turn into stone and turn invisible and fly, and he's got a pig friend, and like there's like it sounds so.
Was Piggy an actual pig?
I believe so. Yeah, I think he's an actual like in the same way that Sun is a monkey.
Because in Lord of the Flies, he wasn't a pig. He was a person.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just wild that this story was written then, because I just feel like it's something you would find in like a comic book age, but it's really coul, and the influence of it is incredible. And so specifically for Sun Wukong, because like you said, there is a lot to cover here. Sun Wukong, the idea of this monkey dude deity king guy is definitely not new to the 16th century. Much before that, specifically they believe it's inspired by the Hindu deity Hanuman from the Ramayana. Hanuman is this action monkey dude who kicks butt, and also there is in Chinese, like local myth. Now China's huge, so when we say China, there's tons of different areas that wouldn't have really intermingled in different time periods. But in the Chinese Chu kingdom, which was 700 to 223 BC, so this was right before the Han dynasty took over, there is a white monkey king legend that was really popular, and its legend was transferred into the Han dynasty, which again, where we have the source of a lot of cultural imagery stories that kind of went on. People in certain areas also worshipped monkey gods long before the novel. 3 monkey saints in a specific palace. It's crazy. So the reverence of like a monkey deity is definitely there. The Chu kingdom, the 700 BC kingdom, actually revered the gibbons, the little monkeys, which Sun Wukong is sometimes based off of. So it's totally, it's in the culture, it's in the roots, and it's not surprising to see it kind of go from there. It's sort of like how Homer wrapped up all this ancient story and then kind of made a continuity to it. I kind of feel like that's what Journey to the West is doing. It's taking all these stories, wrapping it into one kind of cohesive thing, and that people enjoy. And it's funny though, the people really closely associate him apparently, Sun Wukong, with Buddhism and things like that. But it's almost like it's like, I don't know, having like Captain America be a Christian icon. It's like, I mean, no, like it's not, But it's funny because the public really sees him that way, and he does, like when you were telling the story just now, he wants to find the way, and you could kind of think of it allusions to enlightenment, and if it's literal immortality or if it's immortality through enlightenment and stuff. So it's fun. The story, it's a cool way to kind of put these philosophical beliefs in a more palatable way. So. That's essentially it. I most of this, like I said, there's a ton here, but Britannica and Wikipedia, of course, were really great ways to kind of look into everything. Just to kind of sum up everything. So Wu Chang'an, 16th century writer, probably wrote it. It was all posthumous, and it kind of originated in the town where he died. So that's kind of where it all sort of started. People started claiming it was him. So I guess they're like, just, screw it. He was a good writer. Let's do it. And they did cross-reference his other writings with it. So there is some proof in the pudding there. But it spawned into a crazy amount of modern adaptations, especially in Asia where it's extremely popular. I think there's like a new movie version of it every couple years. Like if you look at the Wikipedia page for the book, you can see a little section of adaptations. There's a manga, there's video games. The one really popular video game recently, a few years ago, on Enslaved: Odyssey to the West, is really cool because
that
it's
was
like,
a really good game.
Yeah,
very similar
yeah.
to Uncharted in the way
Right,
you move
yeah,
around and
third
stuff.
person adventure, you had a Monkey King dude, but the enemies were it reminds me of Horizon Zero Dawn too, because the enemies are all like mechanical or augmented, kind of like a steampunky vibe to it. It was really cool. But yeah, tons of there's operas that have been made since the 16th and 17th centuries. There's a really great TV show that was done. Apparently, it has variations in Korea, Japan. It's timeless. Like even not just the things that were inspired of it, the direct adaptations are huge. And every other year there's something. He's even featured. Sun Wukong is featured in a few anime right now, and a bunch of popular games. There's a game called Smite, which takes a bunch. It's like a MOBA, I believe, and it takes a bunch of like gods and deities and kind of uses them as source material. And he's in that. He's doing he has his rod. He's using some famous abilities. Most notably, like he can duplicate himself, and that's one of the more used abilities that he has, is making copies of himself and things like that. So, yeah. Oh, and I totally forgot to mention too, the first big translation, this guy Arthur Waley in 1942 translated it. I think he called it Monkey. Yeah, he called it Monkey is kind of the way he translated it. And it's still pretty widely used. And there's been a few other adaptations that were done in the 80s, and then a few modern ones. But I don't think it was one that was incredibly hard to change. It wasn't like as cryptic, and like the vernacular probably helped. But ever since, it has been. Oh no, never mind. As soon as I say that, I do see a note that says there's a lot of incidental passages that go very badly into English. So never mind. But yeah, there are translations you can read of it out there, as well as the media adaptations. So one day I'm gonna watch some one of them. I mean, I think there's a show on Netflix even. Yeah, there is. Yep, yeah, there's a show on Netflix, so we don't have a reason to. Well, cool. Cami, thanks for tackling this one. We've been working on it for a couple weeks because it was a little tricky to find
so much.
Yeah, a way in. Maybe we'll revisit it somehow. But yeah, well, everyone, let us know what you think, and if you've been exposed to the story Journey to the West or anything like that, or if you're familiar with it. Cami, thanks again for your story. Everyone,
thank you for your research.
Yeah. Oh, there's still a lot there. But everyone, please check out our Facebook group. Mythstorie with an IE is how you can find us. We're on Twitter as well, and a few other social media.
Instagram, yeah, YouTube. We're starting the videos now.
Yeah, so. That's right. Yeah, you can see Cami and I physically Skype in over this if you'd like. Head to our YouTube channel and you can actually see us discuss this wonderful topic. So I think that's about it, Cami.
I think so.
Cool. We'll see you guys next time.